The intersectionality of privilege connects to each and every one of us in different ways. But before we delve into our unique stories, we need to establish some basic definitions.
Privilege is a special right or advantage granted or available to a particular person or a particular group. And associations with privilege are, like, for an example, white privilege, cisgender privilege, heterosexual privilege, and another key note to remember about privilege is that it is not earned.
A disadvantage is something that prevents you from or makes you less likely to succeed in life that comes from being a part of a particular group. Common groups that have disadvantages associated with them are being disabled, being elderly, being a person of color.
Intersectionality is the study of overlapping systems of oppression, domination, and discrimination, and it varies on biological, social, and cultural categories such as race, gender, and class, ability, sexual orientation, and etc.
So the matrix of domination, according to Patricia Hill Collins, emphasizes the multiple forms of oppression that work simultaneously against someone. So, for example, a poor lesbian female, she has to face classism because she's poor, heterosexism because she is lesbian, and sexism because she's a female. So all three of those work against her, making her life more difficult than someone who didn't have to face that.
Our group, GALS JK, is going to talk about privilege. We're going to do a demonstration where we all stand on the same line to show that we all start with the same privilege, and then we'll ask questions about how our life has been changed based on privilege or disadvantage. So the questions that ask you to take a step forward talk about privilege, and then the questions that ask you to take a step back talk about disadvantages.
If you are cisgender, take a step forward. If you have ever been told that your clothes are too revealing or distracting to others, take a step back. If you've ever been asked where you're really from, take a step back. If you have ever felt discriminated due to your race, ethnicity, or skin color, take a step back. If you have ever been followed in a store because you look suspicious, take a step back. If you have ever been profiled and followed by a police officer, take a step back. If you have ever been denied a job or a job interview because of your race, ethnicity, or skin color, please take a step back. If you have ever felt unwelcome somewhere due to your religion or worship practices, please take a step back. If you have ever been diagnosed with a mental or physical disability, take a step back. If you have ever felt scared to walk alone in the dark because of your gender, please take a step back. If you carry pepper spray or have taken a self-defense class in order to feel safer when walking alone at night, take a step back. If you have not been asked how to pronounce your name, please take a step forward. If you have traveled outside your home state, take a step forward. If you have traveled outside your country, take a step forward. If English is not your first language, take a step back. If your parents had to work overtime or one or more jobs in order to pay all the bills, take a step back. If you are being raised by a single parent, take a step back. If one or both of your parents went to college, take a step forward. If your parents are first-generation immigrants, take a step back. If you're a first-generation college student, take a step back. If you experience love for the same gender, take a step back. If you have to take out one or more loans to afford school, take a step back. If you have to work one or more jobs because financial aid is not enough, take a step back. If you have financial support from one of your parents, take a step forward. If you do not have to work while in school, take a step forward. If your family has ever had to worry about getting food on the table or providing for the family, take a step back. If the high school you attended had an SAT average above the national average, take a step forward. If your high school offered a variety of AP classes or other advanced and honors classes, take a step forward. If your parents sent you to after-school activities like music, art, and language, take a step forward. If you qualified for free meals or meal assistance at high school, take a step back. If your parents went to college for a bachelor's degree, take a step forward. And if they earned a higher degree, take two. If your parents did not finish high school, take a step back. If you have ever felt attacked due to the use of gendered slurs, take a step back. If you feel safe expressing your affection to your partner in public, take a step forward. Now look around and see where you stand.
I ended up in the front. I think it was mostly because a lot of the ones we took a step backwards didn't apply, but then all the ones that took a step forward really ended up applying. Like the fact that I grew up in an educated family and in a fairly safe and decent neighborhood.
I ended up towards the front like I thought I would because I got a good education. I went to a good high school.
When the game ended, I ended up somewhere between the middle and the front, which is what I kind of expected. And it was interesting to see how far back some people were and how far forward other people were. I definitely didn't think that the gap would be that wide.
After we completed the activities, some members of our group reflected on their privileges and disadvantages and how this class impacted their views on these topics.
So the biggest privilege that I feel I've had is being cisgender. I have a partner that's transgender, and I definitely see the struggles that he goes through with the process of transitioning, hormones, being able to get the hormones, the process that it is to change his name, to get surgery. So I definitely feel like that's been a great deal of my life, not really having to do all of that stuff, because I identify as a female, the sex that I was given to at birth, so I definitely feel like that's the biggest advantage that I've had. So I feel the biggest disadvantage I've had is being a minority. My parents came here when I was 5, and I grew up here. I was teased a lot because English wasn't my first language. So the thing that I remember the most is we were doing popcorn reading, and the word island came up, and I pronounced it as island, and that really affected me, like the rest of my school year. So I feel like being a minority in the United States is very difficult, especially for first generation college students. You really don't know the support that is available for you. Even here being in UC Davis, it took me a while to really find my resources on campus and off. It was really hard to find a community that I found myself comfortable around, whether it be the Chilac community or the queer community. It was really hard to find myself. Also being part of both communities is very difficult for myself.
Certainly, I have felt the privilege of being a male more than one time over. I have always known that someone as close to me as my mother has made lower wages her entire life than the men around her, who are no more professionally advanced than her. So men are privileged, and I have felt that privilege throughout my life. One of the largest disadvantages that I have noticed personally was in learning the language and in continuing to learn the language, because as you can obviously tell, I have an accent. That is something that people notice about me right away, and in certain instances in life that has worked against me. So that's certainly a disadvantage that I've noticed in my life. One specific privilege that Karen Brodkin described was that Jewish immigrants, especially after World War II and after the atrocities of the Nazis were first discovered in America, took advantage of the FHA loans that were offered by the government in the United States. That was something that I was unaware of, and that was something that I learned in this class.
In your life?
Well, I mean, obviously I had white privilege growing up, and I think that came with a lot of other privileges in the area where I'm from. Like, I went to a really great high school, and that gave me a lot of advantages education-wise. Like, I was able to take a lot of AP classes and prepare myself for college in that way. I also grew up in a really nice area with a really loving and caring family, and I had both of my parents. I also had all of my grandparents, and I feel like having those family members there to educate me and help me throughout my life was a big advantage for me. Well, the biggest disadvantage that I can think of was that growing up, both of my parents were really poor. So that stopped me from doing a lot of activities that my classmates were doing, which ended up really setting me back socially. It also set me back school-wise because my parents were never there to help me with homework and everything. In high school and college, it set me back because I had to work juggle work and education. I think my privileges and disadvantages have kind of intersected, I guess, in my life. Obviously, I had a lot of privileges just because of the neighborhood that I grew up in and because of how loving my family was as I grew up, and then going to a really good school. And I think that kind of I don't want to say that it counteracted it, but that's kind of what ended up happening. Growing up in such a nice area ended up giving me a lot of advantages that I wouldn't have otherwise had, and it ended up counteracting a lot of the disadvantages that I could have had. I think the major thing that I'm learning coming away from this class is that certain disadvantages that you have will have other disadvantages that build on top of them. So it's almost like you start with one, and then that one disadvantage that you have comes with all of these other ones, and it really sets back the groups that have these disadvantages.
I'm able-bodied and cisgender, and I've had the opportunity to have my parents alive, which is something people don't have, and I'm grateful for that. Another disadvantage I've had was not being straight, even though my parents never really cared too much about that. There's the whole societal thing. Disadvantage, my parents are immigrants, so that's always been an issue in terms of getting citizenship, financial aid, things like that. Being Hispanic but being light skinned has also been an issue for me, because from the perspective of white people and any other race besides Mexican, they consider me Mexican and they'll treat me as such, the disadvantages and the positive that come with that. But then being light skinned, my Mexican peers have also given me the whole, you're not really one of us, you don't look like one of us, you don't talk like one of us, so you're not really part of that. So that's kind of something I've always had to deal with. Well, for one thing, you always kind of just assume you see a white male and you always just assume he has privilege and that their life is easy. But doing the line game and learning about privilege and disadvantage in class, you realize that that's not the only thing that matters. Race isn't the only thing that defines your privilege. Neither is gender. There's so many more things like religion and class that matter as well, and also just visualizing and talking about how this affects people has really put it into perspective that we've all had something in our lives that made it hard, but we've also had something that's also given us privilege. Even if we don't recognize it right away, we all have something to be thankful for in a way.
I think the thing about being in the front is that when you're up in the front, you really don't think about looking back and seeing the people behind you because you're not really aware of that. They're not in the immediate field of vision. And so you're so focused on yourself and how you are moving forward that you don't think to turn around. Whereas when you're in the back, those people, they're in the back and they can totally see everyone who's in front of them, so they're really aware of the fact that they're back there. And so I think that it is important that even in life, you have to turn around and you have to be aware of all those people who are behind you.